Talk Show. Recorded live.
Welcome and thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. As many people have listened over the years to our business talks, you try to glean and find ways that you can conduct and build a business in a way that seems prosperous, but at the same time gives back to the community. On the program today, we're going to be joined by someone who is widely considered to be one of the pioneers of the check cashing industry in the state of California. He is the founder of the Financial Service Centers of America and Community Financial Service Providers. He also spearheaded much of California's legislation aimed at regulating check cashiers and protecting consumers. We're going to be talking about his book, Nixland, Wild Ride in the Inner City Check Cashing Industry. And I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program our guest, Mr. Tom Nix. Tom, how are you?
I'm great. Good morning, Daniel. How are you?
Doing well. I really got a kick out of when I started reading the book to realize that you more or less grew up in the same areas that I did, San Pedro, California, and we talk about Harbor Hospital, and I was thinking, wow, this is really close to home here.
Wow,
but, of course, yours was back in the 1950s where mine was in the early 1960s. So.
All right. Well, I'll give you that one. But you grew up in San Pedro?
Yeah, San Pedro, born in Torrance, Wilmington, Long Beach, you name it.
Wow.
So when I was hearing you talk about all these areas, and especially when you were talking about your childhood moving into a new neighborhood and the kids kind of sizing and measuring you up, deciding which one's going to beat your butt first, I remember all that. It's a pretty crazy city that back in those days. Tell us about that and how this all started for you.
Well, you know, in San Pedro, when I went to San Pedro High School, I joined a club called the Essex. And, you know, most people would call that a gang today.
Mm-hmm.
But in those days, we had maybe 25, 30 clubs in town. We had a bunch of great guys in this club. Our objective was we had three objectives: to get drunk, get lucky with the girls, and fight anyone that looked at us in a hostile manner. So we were pretty successful at that. I had dozens and dozens of street fights in those days. I was good at it. I liked it. And that's really one of the amazing things is from that time growing up. I mean, I also went to USC and got a business degree there and had a number of great experiences. But I think one of the turning points of my life was in 1976 when a friend of mine urged me to read the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Mm-hmm.
And I developed actually a crusade for about 10 years of understanding and learning everything I could about how to, you know, create a more happy, healthy, prosperous life for myself, and actually have written just a 3-page paper called Life's Key Concepts, and it's on my website if anybody's interested in taking a look at it.
Now, you started this all off, too, with the check cashing, but originally it started out selling bread, and you just thought you'd kind of add that service as something as a side note to help people out, but it kind of turned into its own thing.
Yes, my dad was sales manager of a company called Golden Crust Bakery, and their major competitor was Helms Bakery. And back in the 50s and 60s, you know, people had their bread and their milk delivered to the home. Well, by the mid-60s, that was going away as housewives all went to work, and my dad had Golden Crust sold out to Helms. My dad started a bakery distributorship on Firestone near Alameda Street, basically in south central Los Angeles, near the Watts area of Los Angeles, initially to distribute bakery products and sell day-old bakery products that the drivers didn't sell that day. And that evolved into a full-service mom-and-pop grocery store where we learned how to cash checks, and that evolved into Nix Check Cashing.
Mm-hmm. Now, what was interesting is, first of all, the idea of cashing checks and sometimes how risky that can be, but generally, as you were talking about in your book, especially in these neighborhoods that seem a little oppressed, for lack of a better word, that people were very hardworking and, you know, pretty well honest and you know, took care of business.
Exactly. You know, there's a common misconception that people that live in the low-income areas are somehow not trustworthy and don't work hard, and that is completely false. I mean, 90-something percent, I mean, a huge percentage of the population that lives in these communities are good, honest, hardworking people. And there is a small segment of the population there that are criminals, and they do prey on the people that live there and the businesses that operate there. So you have to protect yourself from that element. But as long as you can do that, we had a fabulous relationship with our customer base, and we had the business for 42 years before we sold it to Connecticut Federal Credit Union, which is the old Hughes Aircraft Credit Union.
Now, tell us, first of all, how you began to build this business, cashing checks. I mean, first it seemed straightforward, this for that, but eventually, more and more people were growing, and it got to a point where you actually had a standalone building. You talked about, for instance, it was an auto repair shop, and you kind of made a deal that the guy finally scratched his head and said, how can I pass something like that up?
Right. Well, we were cashing checks in the market. We had a little two-window booth in the back of the store, and it was so absolutely popular that we had lines that would go down. It was actually up a few stairs. It would go down the stairs and all the way down the center aisle of the store and out onto the street for people coming to cash checks there. And we give great service, and we sold bread 17 cents a loaf in those days. So which was even cheap back in the 60s. But in 1978, to answer your question, we opened our first freestanding drive-through check cashing facility on the corner of Imperial and Figueroa. And within 1 year's time, we were cashing $1 million a week in checks.
Wow.
It was unbelievable. So we sold the market in '79 and began building the chain of Nick's check cashing stores.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you take a look at the landscape today of these check payday loan places versus what you were doing then, what were the differences?
Well, the check cashing industry and the payday loan industry, they're two different industries.
Mm-hmm.
The check cashing industry is basically the same as it's always been, with the addition of some additional products and services like prepaid cell phone cards and prepaid debit and MasterCards and that sort of thing, which were not around in the early days. But the check cashing industry really takes the place of a bank for people that are unbanked, that do not have a bank account. And it's a cash and carry concept where people come in, they present their payroll or government check. You cash the check, you charge them a fee, they pay their bills with money orders. In our case, we charged about 2% of the face value of the check and gave the customer up to 5 free money orders to pay their bills with, which is actually very competitive with the bank, with the bank charges. Mm-hmm. For people that have a low or moderate income. The payday loan industry, on the other hand, provides service to people that are banked. So people that go to a check cashing place that do not have a bank account cannot get a payday loan. Payday loans are a relatively new product, started in the 90s, and the way that works is somebody comes in with their personal check. They post-date the check for, in California, up to 30 days. They pay a fee for the provider to hold the check and deposit it on a pre-arranged date. And so it's a completely different business than the check cashing business. Mm-hmm. We did both services in our check cashing facilities, after that became legal. But it was a small part of our business. It was about 20% of our revenue, because most of our customers could not qualify for a payday loan. They didn't have a bank account.
Mm-hmm. Now, was what you were doing potentially good for people actually going to the next level where they can start banking, or were some of these people pretty locked into having to use this service?
Well, that's a great question. Our mission has always been to create a one-stop shop where people could transition from check cashing into banking. Mm-hmm. And we were successful in teaming up with Union Bank of California in 2000, and 36 of our stores, people could come in and open a Union Bank checking account or savings account but they had to use the full-service ATM that was on the side of the building to conduct their everyday business. One of the motivations for us to sell to Connector Federal Credit Union is they were able to put in full-service banking, so the people could actually come in and vote with their feet. They could choose alternative financial service products offered by NICS, or go to the Connector windows and have full-service banking. So we're really proud that we were able to do that. One of the dynamics of the business is that if you get a small amount of income, so your checks are relatively small, check cashing is very inexpensive. Mm-hmm. But it's based on a rate, 2% of your check. So as your check amount goes up, so does your cost to do business with the check casher. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, banks charge you more because you don't have very much money in terms of minimum balance fees, and if you bounce a check, $35 a whack. So on the other hand, when your income goes up, they charge you less. So if you put those two businesses together in the same place, you give the consumer the opportunity to, choose whichever service best fits their needs.
It's pretty interesting, too, to consider that you were in this business. And, a lot of times it was pretty risky. For instance, you were talking about people who were getting welfare checks that there were, 2 times a month they got these. And so people started scoping when you would go and get the cash because generally those days landed on a Saturday. Right. So you found yourself in kind of hot water sometimes. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, in the book Nixland, I elaborate on a number of pretty amazing things. One of them, as you point out, is some TV-style armed robberies that we had over the years. We had, I have a whole chapter in the book on the 1992 riot, which was just an incredible experience, and it could be a movie, actually. I had an assassination threat by the Chicago mob. I worked 10 years as an LA County Reserve Deputy Sheriff, so I share a bunch of the stories of my experience doing that. And I worked in South Central Los Angeles. So I think that the book is, not only a small business success story, but it's pretty exciting from the standpoint there are experiences there because of the criminal element in the community that, most businesses don't have to face. And then the other thing I'm proud of, Daniel, is that, I share a lot of lessons learned in this book. And so, that was one of my objectives of writing the book.
Mm-hmm. I know it takes a lot of thinking to realize that somebody really wants to be a deputy sheriff when it pays $1 a year and $8 a month in expert shooting fees. And trying to wrap your head around that one there. What were you thinking?
So you actually did read the book?
Yeah, well, yes.
Great. Thank you. Hey, well, I was a young guy, and we were in a rough neighborhood, and I didn't even know about the program, but the local sheriffs came and inspired me to join it, and it was a 26-week academy, 2 days a week, so we got the same training as a regular sheriff. And when I was done with it, I worked in a black and white patrol car, 1 shift a week, for 10 years, and I loved it. But it's irrational to risk your life for $1 a year. But I did get that $8 a month expert shooting pay, so that was pretty exciting.
That's funny. Now, tell us, what were some of the things? I know one of the key components you talked about for successful business was service. And you hear a lot of people tout that this day and age, especially in the banking industry, and you're thinking, what are you people thinking here? Customers are our number one priority, but yet at the same time you're screwing everybody out of their money. It just doesn't even make sense. But service was something that was very important to you.
Yes, and service is probably the hardest thing for any organization to stay on top of. Mm-hmm. And the reason that is because it doesn't demand your attention. Everything in business demands your attention. You got to get the bank deposits in, you got to hire and fire people, you got insurance, you got to pay the rent and all the bills, and you got a lawsuit over here. Everything demands your attention except customer service. So to maintain excellent customer service day in and day out, you've got to figure out a way to keep the organization's eye on that baby. You've got to make sure that's really important. Otherwise, these other things outweigh the customer service aspect. So you've got to have the fire in the belly in terms of taking care of the customer, and not only with an intention, but also with your policies and procedures. So often a well-meaning policy gets in the way of the organization actually delivering excellent customer service. I made it my business to be a teller, go out and work the teller line once a month or once every 2 months, just to see if the policies we're making were getting in the way of our ability to deliver that excellent customer service. It is difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's never easy to please everybody in the first place. Somebody always wants more than what they have in front of them, they can be having an off day and they take it out on you, and it's pretty crazy when it comes to starting a business. It's definitely, as I've suggested and heard from many experts over the years, that if you really want to learn a lot about yourself, start a small business.
Exactly.
What did you learn about yourself?
Well, before we go on that, I want to share one thing regarding the last question.
Mm-hmm.
Our business philosophy was to go about business with a high level of integrity, a strong sense of fair play, compassion, and being an integral part of the communities we served. So we weighed each decision, including customer service decisions, by that basic business philosophy, which was a huge point of difference for us from a lot of our competitors. And our strategy was to provide fast, friendly, courteous service at a fair and reasonable price from locations that were clean, well-maintained, and professionally staffed with people that lived right in the community. So that philosophy and strategy, positioned us to be able to give great service. Now, what was the real question? I forgot.
Well, now the question came back to, that when you start a small business, you learn quite a bit about yourself, who you are. And what did you learn about yourself as you were building this small business?
Well, I learned, number one, that if you're going to be successful in any business, you got to find a need and fill it.
Mm-hmm. And
you can have the best idea in the world, but, if you're not filling important needs, you're not going to be very successful. Also, that especially as a small businessman, you've got to have a lot of passion for what you're doing, and because it's scary. You put everything you have on the line financially, and your reputation, especially if you borrow money from friends and relatives, and or have them invest in your operation. You're on the hook, not only for everything you own, but your reputation's at stake. So you have to have the attitude that you're going to give it your best. You're never going to quit. You got to be courageous about it. Those things, it was surprising how unnerving it was to be in business because things scared you.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially if a pickup truck comes crashing through your place to do a robbery that way, which is in the book, and I thought, somebody must have watched the original Terminator movie or something.
Was that an amazing story? Would you like me to give it?
I was just amazed that somebody actually did that, but it wasn't surprising what people will do when it comes to getting money. But yes, please.
Well, it was right at closing in North Long Beach. A Dodge Ram truck comes crashing through the front lobby window and through the cement bulletproof barrier into the working area of the branch. The manager runs into the office. They throw as much money as possible into the safe and flicks the dial, which, once the dial has been flicked, you can't get back in it.
Mm-hmm.
But there was still quite a bit of money left laying around there, and the robbers grabbed the money, threatened our people there, didn't hurt them, luckily, but they jumped out into a waiting van outside, took off at a high rate of speed with the sliding van door open. Well, luckily, there was a Long Beach police car coming by just at the time as they took off, and he went in pursuit. They crashed into a liquor store. They all fled. Cops caught one guy, in a plant nursery. Then they got a call of a suspicious person by a neighbor nearby, suspicious person in their backyard. When they got there, they found one of the guys dead. He had tried to climb the fence, fell, broke his neck. There was the gun and the sack of money with money laid around the yard.
Ugh.
Unbelievable. And the third guy got away. So we got all our money back, but that stuff like comes right out of TV.
Exactly. And sometimes you can't even write this stuff.
Right.
It just kind of helps itself. Now, I know that you were in your community for, 40 years or better, and that you mostly hired people into your business that were from the community. And to me, that seems like a pretty smart move, because that stretches the hand of how people take ownership of their community, so that maybe if there is the bad element that happens, well, there's a lot more control over being able to do something about it, it seems like.
Well, yes, and it's also the right, fair, honest, honorable thing to do. I mean, you're doing business in a certain community. You owe that community, the people that live in that community, the opportunity to get those jobs and the careers that are created there. I mean, I just think it's the right thing to do. It's also a good, smart business move, because in the customer service business, if you come in and you see your friends and neighbors working there, that makes you feel like home.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very smart thing, and in the minority community, it's very important to folks that the businesses that operate there, provide job opportunities to the people who live there.
Mm-hmm.
So we measured up there.
And you certainly tried bringing big bank financing into investments in the community to help the community build and begin to thrive as well.
Yeah, we had equity partnerships with Western Union, Sun America, Union Bank, and then finally sold to Connecta Federal Credit Union. So we did all we could to create a business that really filled important needs in a right way. When we sold the company, and we had 60 branches, 450 employees, and we served 400,000 in-person, over-the-counter transactions per month. So we were an institution in South Central.
And you consider those are the areas that most people have a view of, whether it's through news or television, that generally the only thing they stores and things like that, and they talk about that they just don't get a chance to thrive or to build on anything, and your story is just the opposite of what's actually going on in there, and you kind of wonder who's feeding the news, for instance. How much of that is really true, that it's really that bad, or is it, versus the stories like yours that never really get heard, or very rarely get heard anyway.
Well, I think there's a bias in the news. I mean, they're looking for things that will be newsworthy, so they don't print the good news.
Mm-hmm.
For example, for close to 40 years, we provided an annual food drive, which we distributed $100,000 worth of food and coupons, money orders or gift certificates from the local grocery stores that would provide a free turkey. We had 1,200 people, 1,200 families that participated in this program every year. Never once was mentioned. Well, maybe once, but we got very little publicity for that because it wasn't popular, and it certainly wasn't popular for a news outfit to give any good credit to a check cashing company for anything they did.
Well, and you take a look at this story, and why it's important and why we love bringing the stories out is because sometimes in a world where it seems there's so much chaos and it makes a person feel that everything is out of their control and whatever they decide to do to make a difference doesn't really seem to matter. It's like, no, this is going on, and there are a lot of people making a difference, and it does matter. Just get up and do something about it, and it just... That's what kind of bothers me of the fact that you had so much going on, and as you said, it was very rarely ever really reported, to make people feel like, that there is a difference that can be made. You just have to, take the first step and do it.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very important.
And what's also important for our listeners to know about this as well is that you guys were more or less the first that created or coined the term mini-mart.
Yes, we are.
Took that right from Arco, or they took it from you, right?
That's correct.
Tom, can you give us a website people can find out more about how to get the book? It's a great story, definitely inspiring.
Well, thank you. I think people really like the book. People tell me that read it that it's a fantastic book. It's nixland.net, so it's NIXLAND, N as in November, IXLAND.net. And I've got a really good website, and I really would like people, I noticed on your website you have a personal development section.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to have your listeners look at my paper that's, life's key concepts on there. I think they'll get something really valuable from that. It's a 3-pager, so it's really easy to read.
And I know that you're also on YouTube as well, where there's a couple of videos that you want to suggest that people watch as well.
Yes, we have on the website there's a section called Memorabilia, and I have a number of videos there. One, which is amazing, is news footage from the riot, and there's a whole bunch of stuff there that people will find interesting. But if they decide to buy the book, and which I hope they do, they can get it at Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com, or it's on as an ebook, Kindle, etc. And you can go through the website and go right to the book on Amazon, what have you.
Well, very good. Tom, thank you so much for joining us here on the program. It's nice to know that the stories are out there. You just find them, and then you tell everybody, and get up and make a difference, and that's what's important.
Well, thank you very much. It's been very enjoyable, and I appreciate your interview style. Very nice.
Thank you very much. Again, the book is Nixland, My Wild Ride in the Inner City Check Cashing Industry. Find out more about how you can learn about some of the things that you should when it comes to starting a small business and what it takes to be successful in your community. We also want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. You've been listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. Our website is beyond50radio.com, the number 50. Thank you again for joining us, and remember, live your day past halfway.